payload being sent to space, which today is Cygnus. Made of a carbon composite material and having a 17-foot diameter, the space within the payload fairing is able to comfortably contain your average-sized fire truck. Now that fairing made up of two halves will separate and jettison away from the vehicle, exposing the payload once Falcon 9 reaches space. Now, Cygnus rolled out to the pad on Friday morning after wrapping up the process known as encapsulation earlier this week. This payload fairing was specially customized to accommodate late load operations on the pad, and we'll talk a bit more about those modifications later on in the program. Continuing on down the vehicle, we have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. After stage separation, the MVAC will ignite and carry the payload to its final orbit. Now, the Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected via a black inner stage, which houses the MVAC engine and the system that decouples the two stages during stage separation. And below that is the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off of the ground through the lower, thicker part of the atmosphere. Each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Now, after stage separation, Stage 1, also called the booster, will return to Earth for recovery and reuse on a future mission. For today's mission, we'll be attempting to land this booster at Landing Zone 1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. And this mission will mark this booster's 10th launch and landing, having previously flown AX-2, Euclid, AX-3, CRS-30, SES Astra 1P, and 4 Starlink missions. Now, weather continues to be a watch item for today's launch from Space Launch Complex 40, and we'll continue providing you updates as the clock ticks closer to T0. For now, let's learn a bit more about the spacecraft delivering roughly 8,200 pounds of science and supplies to the International Space Station. Now, in order to support Cygnus missions, SpaceX designed a custom fairing and payload transfer truck with a mobile clean room to support late load operations, which happen while the rocket is horizontal and on the pad deck. Late load refers to loading cargo in the final hours before launch and after the spacecraft has already been encapsulated within the payload fairing. Now with 8 minutes and 24 seconds to go, we continue to be go for launch, and we'll continue to provide updates on the weather as we get closer to T0. For now, let's head back to Courtney for a closer look at the science on today's mission.
Yeah, Zachary, we are at the T-minus. Microscopic organisms will travel to station to provide crucial insights into how spaceflight affects the ability of damaged DNA to repair itself. STEM demonstrations are educational videos demonstrating STEM topics in space for students on Earth. For this mission, astronauts will use a balloon, a penny, and a hex nut to examine centripetal force. Discover more about all of the science making the journey to the orbiting lab at nasa.gov/ISS-science.
It's T-minus 6 minutes and 20 seconds, and the SpaceX team is currently working no significant issues. Now, at T-minus 38 minutes, the team concluded their go, no-go poll and gave the okay to proceed into propellant load and launch.
Stage 1 RP1 load is complete.
And good call out there for Stage 1 RP1 loading completion. Now, at this point, that RP1 loading is complete on the Falcon 9 second stage and nearly complete on the first stage. The pre-valves between the first stage engines and the propellant tanks are open, and at the T-minus 7 minute mark, engine chill began. Liquid oxygen loading is underway on both stages and will complete at the T-minus 2 minutes to launch. We're also currently loading helium gas into both stages.
Now, to make sure engine startup goes well, SpaceX performed what is called engine chill, where a small amount of the super chilled liquid oxygen flowed into the Merlin engine's turbo pumps, and this was done to avoid a thermal shock to the propulsion system when the full flow of super chilled liquid oxygen is introduced into the Falcon 9 plumbing. Cygnus is also undergoing final vehicle health checks at this moment as it prepares to go on internal battery power, all monitored by Northrop Grumman flight controllers in Dulles, Virginia.
Coming up shortly, the Transporter Erector, or TE, will retract away from the Falcon vehicle. The TE is the large truss structure you see there next to the rocket.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
And good call out there. First, we'll see the clamps open around the second stage, and then the TE will pull away from the rocket by a few degrees. At T0, ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE from about 2 degrees to 45 degrees away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off to provide clearance for the vehicle. We should see those clamp arms opening around the second stage in just about 20 seconds from now.
Strong back lower has started.
And good call out there. Falcon 9's fuel consists of both a propellant and an oxidizer. For our Falcon vehicles, we use a refined kerosene called Rocket Propellant 1, or RP1, and liquid oxygen, or LOX. And there you can see those clamp arms opening around the Falcon 9 second stage. We'll then start to see the strong back recline away from the vehicle. And there you can see that strong back moving away from the Falcon rocket. Now, you may have noticed the white clouds building around the Falcon vehicle. Those white clouds are the chilled gas above the LOX tank that we vent overboard to maintain pressure in the tank as needed. And when that vented oxygen comes out into the warm Florida air, it condenses into clouds. Now, as I mentioned earlier today, the booster supporting today's mission is flying for its 10th time, and a key indicator of this flight history is the soot that you might just be able to make out on the skin of the vehicle there. This soot comes from the carbon-based fuel of the rocket that gets deposited onto the body of the vehicle during re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And good call out there that Stage 1 LOX loading is now complete on the Falcon 9 first stage.
Now, checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators are underway. This is referred to as an engine gimbal or wiggle test. This is when SpaceX moves the nozzles ever so slightly to make sure that the guidance hardware is acceptable for flight. SpaceX does the same checkouts on the first stage engines, and that happens just seconds before ignition.
Now we should be hearing a call out.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And there's that call out right there for Stage 2 LOX loading completion. Now Cygnus is also performing its final health checks to make sure that all of its primary systems are ready for its rendezvous with the International Space Station. And as I mentioned earlier, those white clouds you see around the vehicle are
Gas launch closeout has started.
Good call out there. Those white clouds are completely normal and are just the chilled gas above the LOX tank that we vent overboard to maintain pressure in the tank as needed. Now coming up in about 15 seconds from now, we should hear the call out that Falcon 9 will be in startup, which will mean that the rocket's launch computers will have taken over the count.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And there's the call. Falcon 9 is now in startup. Cygnus is transitioning to internal power, and the Falcon 9 computers are in final pre-launch checks, instructing the
LD,
rocket through the
go
final
for launch.
seconds before liftoff. Both stages are now being pressurized for launch, and the range remains go for launch.
T-minus 30 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engine full power. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go Cygnus, NG-21.
Is en route to the International Space Station.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
As you saw, successful liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Good call out there. Coming up in just about 20 seconds from now, we should hear a call out for max Q. The vehicle passes through max Q, or the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure, when the increasing speed of Falcon and the decreasing air density combine to create
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Combine to create maximum aerodynamic pressure. And good call out there.
Max Q.
And there's that call out for max Q. Coming up next are 5 events which will happen in rapid succession: main engine cutoff, stage separation, second engine start, boost back burn start, and then fairing separation. Main engine cutoff, or MECO, is where all 9...
Chill started.
Good call out there. MECO is where all 9 M1D engines on the Falcon 9 first stage shut down. This is followed by stage separation, or the separation of the first and second stages of Falcon. A few seconds later, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite to boost Cygnus to low Earth orbit, and this is called out as Second Engine Start 1, or SES-1. After that, Falcon 9's first stage will...
Vehicle is following a nominal trajectory.
After that, Falcon 9's first stage will ignite again to orient itself to head back to land. And shortly thereafter, the 2 fairing halves will separate and expose the spacecraft to the vacuum of space. We should be hearing the first of those callouts happening in just a few moments from now.
Main engine cutoff. Stage separation. separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Stage 1 boost back startup.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there we heard the callouts for all 5 of those events, which again were MECO, followed by stage separation, then SES1, boost back burn start, and fairing separation. Now coming up shortly, we should hear a callout for completion of the boost back burn on the Falcon 9 first stage. This burn, which will last in total about 50 seconds, is the first of 3 burns the booster needs to go through to make its way back to landing zone 1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida.
Boost back shutdown.
And there's that call out for boost back shutdown on the Falcon 9 first stage. Now, if you're just joining us, you're watching a live
Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
Good call out there. If you're just joining us, you're watching a live webcast for NG-21, Northrop Grumman's 21st commercial resupply services mission to the International Space Station. This is SpaceX's 74th mission for 2024 and the 5th flight to the orbiting laboratory this year. Now, in order to make its way back to land today, the Falcon 9 first stage has 2 more burns to execute. Next up is the entry burn, where 3 of the Merlin engines will reignite. This helps to slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. And following the entry burn, the booster will go through its landing burn. And this is a single engine burn that brings the vehicle's speed down rapidly in order to land back on Earth. We should be hearing the call out for that entry burn in just about 2 minutes from now. Now, during the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but the rocket is still moving really fast, and this causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, or plume, which deposit a layer of soot onto the vehicle's surface. And that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses, and with each flight, the soot builds up a little more on the outside of the vehicle. Now, as a reminder, on the left-hand side of your screen is the Falcon 9 first stage as it makes its way back to Earth, and on the right side is the MVAC engine on the second stage currently carrying Cygnus to orbit. The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level, and these achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust each during ascent and descent. Now, the MVAC engine, with a much wider nozzle, is optimized to 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum. You may have also noticed on the left-hand side of your screen, Falcon 9 is equipped with 4 hypersonic grid fins, which are positioned near the top of the first stage. And stage 1 is using nothing but grid fins for steering as it returns to Earth. They orient the rocket during re-entry and guide it during its descent back to Earth. Beautiful views of the MVAC engine currently carrying the Cygnus spacecraft to orbit. Now, Now, with the booster on the left-hand side of your screen, you may occasionally see little white puffs, and those are nitrogen gas bursts, which are used for attitude control. We should be hearing that call out for the entry burn of the Falcon 9 first stage in just about 10 seconds from now.
Both vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Good call out there. Now that entry burn will be for the first stage, which is on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And good call out there for entry burn startup on the Falcon 9 first stage.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And there's that call
Stage 1 FTS has safed.
And there's that call out for entry burn shutdown on the Falcon 9 first stage. Now, the first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs made of state-of-the-art carbon fiber with aluminum honeycomb. Placed symmetrically around the base of the rocket, they deploy just prior to landing. If successful, this will be the 10th time that we've recovered this particular booster and the 335th time that we've recovered
Both vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
335th time that we've recovered a first stage booster since our first successful landing in 2015. And we did have a good call out there for vehicles following nominal
Stage 1
trajectories.
transonic.
Amazing view of the Falcon 9 booster as it makes its way back to landing zone 1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida.
Stage 1 landing burn. Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
A spectacular touchdown of our Falcon 9 booster at landing zone 1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Now again, this booster just completed its 10th flight and the 335th successful
Stage 2
landing.
has entered terminal guidance.
335th successful landing
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
for an orbital class rocket, including both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy missions, and good callouts there on the nets. Now, coming up at around the 8.5-minute mark, we should hear a call out for second engine cutoff 1, or SECO 1, which is when the MVAC engine on the second stage shuts down. And that'll conclude the roughly 6-minute burn by this engine needed to get Cygnus into the proper orbit for eventually intercepting the International Space Station. We should hear that call out in just a couple moments.
MVAC shutdown.
And there's that call out for the MVAC shutdown on the Falcon 9 second stage. We're now waiting for confirmation of good orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And there's that call out for nominal orbital insertion. At T plus 9 minutes into the mission, and the second stage has one last major task, commanding separation of the Cygnus spacecraft just a few minutes from now. Now, for those of you just tuning in, you're watching a live webcast for NG-21, Northrop Grumman's 21st commercial resupply services mission to the International Space Station. This is SpaceX's 74th mission for 2024 and the 5th flight to the International Space Station this year. And for those of you following along, you'll know that Cygnus will be joining the Crew 8 SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, which docked with the space station earlier this year in March. Now, both Northrop Grumman and SpaceX have a long history of supporting the International Space Station with cargo missions like today's. SpaceX's first commercial resupply services, or CRS mission, CRS-1, launched in 2012 and made history by restoring America's capability to deliver and return cargo to the station. The Cygnus spacecraft has been visiting the ISS since 2013, and the first Cygnus CRS mission, Orb-1, launched in 2014. Cygnus has since then delivered more than 138,000 pounds of equipment, science experiments, and supplies to sustain the ISS astronauts under NASA's commercial resupply services contracts. Now, the most recent cargo resupply mission was SpaceX's CRS-30 mission on March 21st, 2024, delivering 6,262 pounds of scientific research, crew supplies, and hardware to the orbiting laboratory. Dragon later returned to Earth with 3,961 pounds of cargo. The CRS partnership has helped build a strong American commercial space industry that will soon take us to destinations beyond low Earth orbit. In fact, these missions are providing critical learnings that will help us develop a human presence on the Moon and Mars,